Neil Hamilton.
Well, I don't begrudge Plaid Cymru the opportunity to laud their influence upon the decisions made by the Finance Secretary at all. I totally agree with Adam Price's statement that where one can agree with other parties, it's very desirable that it should do. And, of course, I've spent a fair share of my years in politics opposing very vigorously the policies both of Plaid Cymru and the Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats. But I'm very happy to work together on various things too, and that's a good thing. And this budget is the first one which begins to join the dots, of course, and connect, therefore, revenue raising with expenditure, and that will lead, I hope, to more responsible government and to an enhanced reputation for this Assembly. And I strongly support my Plaid Cymru friends' work over the years to bring about more devolution of taxes in Wales. I'm very much in favour of that, because that does give us then the opportunity to have real budget debates in this place where priorities will differ between the different parties. The debates in the past have all been about how do we spend the money that we're given. We can't influence the size of the pot in the first place, and tax policy in future will increasingly inform these debates, which is an excellent thing. I said in the last debate that actually what we're talking about here today is quite a small portion of the total budget, because most of the budget is not discretionary, has to be spent on health, education and big budget items. Plaid Cymru have managed to secure their priorities for about 500 million of it, and I very strongly support the things that they want to spend the money on, particularly on the Welsh language. I think that's a vital necessity to help to achieve the government's objective of 1 million Welsh speakers by 2050. But there is a certain air of unreality about these budget debates, which the Finance Secretary again perpetuated today by starting off by talking about austerity. Anybody would think that the government at Westminster has actually been cutting the amount of government spending in the last 7 years, whereas the truth of the matter is that government spending has doubled in total in the last 7 years. The national debt is now approaching £2 trillion. I hope the Chancellor of the Exchequer is going to provide the money for a very large party for us all when we do actually hit that £2 trillion figure. It would mean that we could all celebrate it with him. The idea that this Conservative government has pursued a policy of austerity is absolute nonsense. The Chancellor has recently relaxed the date yet again when he aims to balance the budget. And between now and 2021-22, government spending is planned to rise by £30 billion over the plans that were laid out just a few years ago. Of course, we could all follow the policies of the governments of Zimbabwe and Venezuela by taking the brakes off spending altogether and spend as though tomorrow never comes. But the trouble with socialism is, of course, eventually you run out of other people's money to spend, which has been the experience of the Wilson governments in the 60s and 70s and the Callaghan government. I give way, of course, to my
Well, I was saying, of course, that Franklin Delano Roosevelt did exactly that, the New Deal, which got America out of the recession.
Yeah. Well, what brought America really out of the recession, of course, was the war. Well, there are various ways. There are various ways in which you can raise economic activity, but I don't think that war is necessarily the most attractive of the options. Tomorrow does eventually come. We're spending £50–60 billion a year on debt interest in the UK. If we take Wales's proportion of that, that may be £2 billion a year. Would we rather spend £2 billion a year extra on the health service or on the holders of the national debt? Actually, what the government has done is to nationalise a great part of the national debt in the last few years, because the Bank of England has actually been buying the bonds from the private sector, and monetisation of the national debt of that kind cannot continue indefinitely without the same kind of inflationary implications which have consumed countries like Venezuela or Zimbabwe. Although I think the government is wrong nationally in Westminster in many of its priorities, their overall policy on public expenditure, in my view, has been lax, not austere. And they've been stoking up problems for the future. We make a great song and dance in this place about the Future Generations Act, and I think it's a very good thing in principle to think of the impact of our decisions today upon the generations to come. And what we are doing, of course, is to shuffle off the cost of repayment of the debts that we are incurring today on future generations. And I don't think that future generations will thank us for that. But of course, they don't have votes today, so we don't need to worry about it. And we won't be here when they do vote. At least I won't be. They're unlikely. But you know, I think an air of responsibility is one which we should have in any budget debate. And sadly, I fear for the future if the kind of speech which the Finance Secretary has made today, when the Welsh Government really does have the ability to raise taxes and to make spending decisions and to make borrowing decisions over a much greater area than it now has the power to do, fall to be made, because that way, I think, lies the kind of economic ruin which has consumed so many Labour governments in my lifetime.